All right, so my mom asked me to record a video of me making something on here, and I don't really want to get grounded, so I figured I should probably make it. Um, so yeah, I'm gonna be making this axe here. Um, I have tried making stuff like this before, like blades, knives, stuff like that, and like the pointy end. I always felt like was like I just couldn't get it right, and so this one, like making this, I was a little nervous. Like I thought I was gonna give up on it. This is actually the third idea or the third project I had for this video. Um, so I'm glad I was able to actually finish it. Cutting that out was surprisingly difficult because um, when you're using a subdivision, like on the right there, you see that I have a list of modifiers. One of them says subdivision. And if you cut a hole into a mesh that has subdivision on it, it it really messes it up and it makes it doesn't want to work right because what you're doing is you're creating a lot of lines that that the modifier is gonna have to calculate and try and um, smooth out basically because that's what the subdivision modifier does. It basically smooths everything out and increases the amount of polygons on the mesh, and it like averages the distance between vertexes. And so when you make a cut into a mesh like that and it just goes through it and you don't really put any effort, you don't put any care into where the cuts are and how they align up with the rest of the shape, the subdivision modifier isn't going to work properly. It'll end up making those weird lines that you saw. But I was able to clean it up and make it look normal. So right here, I've finished modeling, um, and now I'm retopologizing, where basically I'm making the model again, but on, but with a lower poly mesh, because like I mentioned before, the other one was subdivided and it has many faces and a lot of geometry to it that's not really necessary. And so I made it a lower poly mesh that conformed to the shape of the high poly mesh. And here I'm marking the seams for where I'm gonna tear the mesh apart and lay it flat so that when I texture it, um, all the textures will know where to go onto the object. and I'm going back and forth between Blender and Substance Painter because I kept messing up. I didn't understand why certain parts of the object wasn't translating properly into Substance. So I did a little bit more cleanup here. I didn't really need to do all of this optimizing, and I probably did too much. The end result kind of shows a little bit that I did a little too much optimizing there. That big triangle fan on the face is unnecessary. Maybe I'll go back and fix that. Yeah, finally happy with how it imported now. Just want to throw together a basic looking axe to see how I felt about it. And now I started going after the reference. It was has like this like plastic handle with like a rubberized grip. Um which I didn't model. I thought about modeling it. I thought about modeling the rubberized texture, and then I thought maybe I could get away with drawing that rubberized texture in substance. And so that's kind of what I did. You'll see in a minute here that I ended up drawing that texture on because I felt it would be easier than trying to model it. In hindsight, there's probably a better way to draw this orange circle, but I think it ended up looking pretty good, so I'm not complaining. The point of the low poly mesh, by the way, was to have an easy to render model with high quality textures on it. And so what I did was I went with the low poly mesh, when I imported it into Substance, I took the shape of the high poly mesh and I baked it onto the low poly one. And so it created textures. It's called a normal map, and it applied it to the low poly mesh, and it tells the software how to reflect light based on different angles. And essentially, what it does is it makes a low poly object look like it's very high poly because of the because you took the shape of the high poly mesh and it's infused onto the low poly one without actually changing the geometry. Right here, I'm just adding finer details. I thought it would look nice if it looked pretty dirty. The one that I was looking at, the reference I was looking at on Amazon was too clean, and I thought that if I just made a really clean looking axe, it would be kind of boring. So I sprinkled on some dirt here. Right now I'm working on some scratches onto the metal because I thought that it would look really nice if it had some very faint scratches. Start playing around with some more dirt textures to throw on there. Oh yeah, I saw this weird issue with the seam on the back of the handle and I didn't know what was going on. That line there, that's the seam when I was making the when I was unwrapping the mesh in Blender. That was the seam where it ripped the mesh apart to lay it flat. And because of that, there's this line, and I'm trying to figure out why that line's there. Um, it turns out it was the sand texture that I put over the whole mesh as a sort of like faint amount of dirt to be visible. For some reason, it didn't like that. It didn't like that seam, so I just disabled the height map on that texture, and it fixed it. Right here, I added some. I thought it would look really neat if the grain there kind of extended onto the flat part of the axe, like it had been used and the paint was stripping off just a little. And I was cleaning up that sharp edge there, make it a little bit more of a smooth transition. At this point, I'm basically done. I'm just having so much fun with it. I didn't really want to stop adding details. So I thought, what else can I add? So I started sprinkling some stuff on the handle. I think I ended up throwing some scratches on here as well. Yeah, the bottom is an area that, like, on a real axe, you would expect to see a lot of wear and tear. This thing gets tossed around and whatnot. Couple thumbprints on there for good measure. Yeah, I put a few on the handle, but they're really not visible. I don't know how I feel about that thumbprint up there. it's kind of pointed the wrong direction. It doesn't feel very natural, but whatever. This area on the top looked too flat. Thought it needed some love, but honestly, it didn't really change a whole lot. So it just kind of is the way it is now. Alright, time to bring it back to Blender. I don't know if this is a very professional lighting setup. This is just what I've been doing lately. Seems to work out pretty well. Yeah, you can see there on the blade. When I mentioned there's a triangle fan there, you can kind of tell based on the way the reflections are reflecting. You can kind of tell that there's like a weird shape going on there. It's very subtle, and I didn't notice it until I finished recording. Yeah, you can kind of see that's what I'm fixing here right now. It's another issue with triangle fans. I was able to fix it by shading that area flat. I can't exactly do that on the axe head because it's not a flat surface. The render's finished, just adding some final touches. And we're done. That's it. Go back and fix that issue I had with the triangle fan. And so now that area, that flat part of the axe head, it looks like it should now, and it's flat, and you can see. I don't know if you can tell the difference, but I can. It looks a lot better now. But anyway, that's it. Thanks for watching, I guess. Bye.